Welcome to the Occult Rejects. In this episode, I'm very lucky to have with me an all-star cast. I got the mad scientist herself, Lisa, with me today. What is going on, Lisa? Thank you for jumping on and co-hosting again on the Occult Rejects.
Absolutely looking forward to this. Love
Yes.
these two a lot. So,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
it's going to definitely be an
Dana
amazing
and JJ are
episode.
awesome. Yeah.
Two huge brains right here. Well, three really. I got you too. So, and as Dana says that she wanted your beautiful brain here on the show today.
That's right. Yes.
Good.
So, yes, I always look forward to having you on the panel as well. And I do have, obviously, I got Dana and JJ Vance with me. Two people that I would highly, I consider occult rejects in their own way. You know what I'm saying? They're
Nice.
doing what they do. They may not, mess with magic and occultism, but they are finding stuff that is hidden and unseen. So, in a sense, I am always happy to have them on because I do consider them like part of the crew, you know. And I think they're great researchers, and I love what they do. Dana, we'll start off with you. Let everybody know who you are, what's your deal, where they can find your stuff.
Sure. So I'm Dana, Rotting Jewels on YouTube and Instagram, and then Dana Duda on Twitter. I'm researching the process and all of the cults and Scientology.
Yeah, you definitely have to. People, you don't follow her on Twitter and on YouTube. You really need to because her posts too. She's like the king of fucking trolling. It is. I love it, and like it's. I look at her stuff and I'm like, I wish I could make this video. Like I wish I could make this quality.
It's
And I'm
true.
like, God damn it, how's she do it? And she talks shit at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's done in a good way though. It's done in a very educated kind of like, fuck you way. So definitely go check out her stuff because if anything, you'll definitely get laughs if not educated. So definitely check out her links in the bottom. And JJ, my man, what is going on? Let everybody know what your deal is if they don't know already.
Howdy. Howdy, folks. JJ Vance. Nice to join you again today, Nick. Appreciate the invite and looking forward to the conversation on the Process Church. And Lisa and Dana, I'm sure you'll have some other mind-blowing pieces of information as you all did last time we talked about the Process Church. I know I learned a lot of information in our previous Process Church discussion that even I was unaware of in my, various studies of the process. So definitely looking forward to the conversation. Again, JJ Vance, I'm the host of the Operation GCD podcast, and Nick will have a link for my show here in the notes, and it's I bill my podcast as a shenanigan infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude, and like to discuss various things of an occult nature, cult groups, and other various taboo topics in our modern era of censorship.
Yes, and you do a really good job at it. And I know I've said it before the last few times, especially for smiley face killers stuff. Go check out my man's stuff for that. He's
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you.
yeah, no, of course. And I highly suggest it. Came out today. If you haven't watched it yet, The War of 1812 dropped on the
Oh, nice.
Netflix as well, and he was in that. That was an amazing series with him and Headless, the Society of Cincinnati. I think that's actually a topic that needs to be looked at and talked about more than it is. So definitely go check.
Oh, for sure.
So all right, we have a bunch of things that I kind of wanted to talk about. They both have different. They're both in different areas right now of looking at the same thing, and I want to try to like bring it all together. I know we did talk about some music in the last one. I will like to try to touch on that with the Beatles at the maybe closer to the end of the episode, but I did want to start off a little bit with Dana because I do know that she's been going into like the Son of Sam and the Children of God, and I guess really, honestly, for me, um, and I do find it interesting. I have heard this mentioned a few other times with this tie, but actually I have zero clue on how it actually ties in. So I guess like it's really actually interesting for me and to educate me and myself. I would like to know like how you did you even stumble upon like the Son of Sam and the Children of God looking into the Process Church? Like if you don't mind explaining this spider web or rabbit hole of how you got there.
Sure. So looking at the Son of Sam, in particular, I am of the opinion, just coming in someone that's not familiar with the case outside of one read of the Ultimate Evil, that he drove home the point of Scientology and Michael Vale Carr III's involvement, but outside of that, I didn't really find anything else as far as Michael being in the church. So, with the Children of God in particular, when you step back and kind of look at the timeline and you're figuring out, Michael Carr III, when he's going clear, I am of the suspicion, or the opinion, I should say, that Michael Samuel Carr, Sam of the Son of Sam, I have identified him as being Michael Samuel Carr II. He was also going clear in Los Angeles in 1968, which makes things very, very interesting. But when we get closer to the time of what happened in Jonestown, obviously David Berkowitz is already in jail, right? They're kind of trying to tie everything up and put it into a neat little bow. However, when you look at what's going on within New York itself, you have, I think, 3 process churches, you have 2 Scientology organizations, you also have the UN, you have Jeffrey Epstein. They're all within walking distance, like right at the same time. Now, what happens right after Jonestown is the Church of Scientology, the Children of God, the Moonies. I think those are the 3 main groups. They come together and form I think it's the Associated People for Religious Freedom. I'm still familiarizing myself with the name because they end up changing it. But what they're doing is they're trying to protect themselves because they know what happened at Jonestown wasn't what the public was being told, right? So they are basically trying to kind of move in lockstep with the government as far as, I mean, this is in my opinion, but I'm going to work on laying out the argument with documentation. As far as we are now a religion, we are protected, you cannot investigate us. We are practicing our religious rights. Now, previously, when I was looking into Heber Jensch, he was in the newspapers with the Children of God in court, arm in arm, about how they needed to be able to practice their religious freedom. And I was like, oh, Heber, like, why did you have to do that? Not the Children of God. But it makes sense because strategically that makes sense to me because there's a really strong disinformation campaign going out about the process right now, and in particular their timeline. It's being repeated that they, disbanded, shut down, dissolved in 1974. This is not true. They are in New York. They never left New York. Let's just say that. Obviously, they changed their names a few times, but the interesting thing that I think the Children of God is going to be where I find them within this coalition, this front group that is formed, is 1978. I think it was January 1978. The Foundation Faith of the Millennium, they throw this event called the Festival of the Spirit, and it's the Mormons, the Sheiks, the Sufis, who else? I can't even remember. There was so many. And basically, it was everybody coming together. And at 5 p.m., they were all going to say their... Mm-hmm.
Well, Mormonism did come from New York.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because it's almost like, hey, let's all join up, right? Let's all get it figured out. And at 5 o'clock, they all chant their God, whatever God it is, in unison, and they're not converting anybody. They're not proselytizing. They're very clear about that. Father Malachi of the process.
Malachi.
So there's that angle. Now, the other angle is, and I had brought it up a long time ago, and I knew that I would be coming back to it. When we look at the process after they leave California, because in my opinion, they're running away from Cielo Drive and the things that are going on, they immediately go into their Jesus freak movement, their Jesus people movement. They start talking about that immediately in the papers. And I have them in Canada specifically right afterwards, and Chicago, and they're basically on the same street as the Children of God when the Children of God were in their Jesus freak phase. So this is where all of these things are going to start coming together. I've just started this part as far as like going through it in my research because I'm still at a great disadvantage with the Son of Sam stuff because there's so many names and there's so much information. But I think that the research that was done and the information that was given about the stuff with Roy Cohn, the stuff with the UN, and these like underground networks. I think that the Children of God is a really big missing angle of that, because everybody knows what the Children of God was doing. You know what I mean? And if all of these cults are, very incestuous, they are very incestuous, but particularly the process.
Oh, yeah.
That's why they don't believe in anything and everything at the same time. I think that this is where we're going to see this sort of like hotbed of activity, because Jeffrey Epstein is literally within a 10-minute walk from all of these people at that time.
That's crazy. You mentioned Canada. Do you know where in Canada by any chance? Where they
I believe
went?
that they were in Toronto.
It's interesting because, so looking at some of the stuff, the University of Ottawa did a study on the CIA's research into psychedelics from the 1950s to the 1980s. And it was really big of the study that they were looking at because of the activity going back and forth between the US and the United States. And apparently they were looking at all the psychedelic research being done on prisoners, specifically blacks in prison. And with the Children of God, what was interesting, when they went into Guyana or South America, Guyana is predominantly black. And it was during the whole wanting to look at black psychology, and it revolves around the whole, what is it, Tuskegee experiment. I mean, they were wanting to see how minorities react, not only psychologically wise, but also demographic wise, health and all that other stuff. It just seems like Canada keeps popping up with some of this stuff that you're mentioning as well. So I was curious to see if it was in the same area.
Absolutely. Someone had brought it up in one of my chats recently that, they're very interested in the early activities of the process in Canada. And I think that they are, now that we're going to be circling back, I think that they're going to play into this in a really big way. Because, there's an interview with D.A. Leifer and Francis Carr, Sam Carr, and Wheat Carr. And it was, after John and Michael had passed away. And they were particularly asking about not only Michael's time in Scientology, which that was the only time that Samuel Carr put his foot down and said, "Hey boys, you got to step out because I need to talk to my wife alone for a minute." And I said, "Oh Sam, look at the big brass set on you putting your foot down," which makes me think that my suspicion of him being Michael Samuel Carr II is correct. But there was also an inquiry about Michael being a part of the Phoenix House. I had never heard of the Phoenix House before. The Phoenix House was basically Synanon rebranded, and all the people that founded
really?
Yeah. Yeah, everybody that founded Phoenix House were Synanon members.
Yo, I had one. I grew up in Ronkonkoma when I was a kid. I'm not there anymore. On the lake, they had Phoenix House. And that was like some really weird shit. Yo, they had a fucking gate with like a security guard booth. You weren't getting in unless they even let you. Yo, I'm like, I remember one time, like me and my friend were like driving down the lake, and like some kid that looked like he probably left the place was walking on the side of the road. And I literally was like, yo, should we see if this kid needs a ride? And he did leave from there. This is the weirdest thing. It was like actually bizarre. We were stone driving. I was like, oh, let's pick up this kid. Whatever, because like on that area of the lake, you're kind of like, it's just a shitty spot to walk if you had to walk. So whatever.
Did he escape? Did he escape the facility?
He's like, yo, I left. He's like, this shit is like military camp. He's like, they're telling motherfuckers to sweep away the sun. He's like, they got to sit there all day with it and just sweep. He's like, they got people with spoons building, like digging holes and moving the dirt and then just moving the dirt back. He's
you
got to walk around with signs on it. And I was like, yo, that is legit. Going forward 20 years from then, I'm remembering this shit and watching Synanon and saying, this is the same exact fucking thing. Yep. And like I myself I never went to a therapeutic community, but I have mentioned I have about a 5-year stint with a problem with heroin. I was a dope fiend for 5 years. I've been in rehabs and detoxes, and some places like outpatient stuff. There are some places that still try to like use that style where it's just like very combative, and I honestly don't think it's helping at all.
Most rehab facilities in America use that same style approach because they're Narconon.
Or you get like
Narconon has a huge percentage.
Telling on
Narconon Scientology. So
I mean this
go ahead.
This is the lunacy. I was when I went to prison because I went for drugs. Somehow I'm on my steroids. Somehow he got the judge to be like, maybe we should recommend a drug program because he was addicted to using them himself, and it worked. And if I took the program, you'd get some time off. I ended up fucking it up and getting kicked out, so I never got the time off. But I ended up getting into it. I think it's called RDAP. It was RDAP. And you're in prison, and now you're in this program. You have to rat on people.
Oh my God.
I was like, this motherfucker's getting beat up for being a fucking rat on the other side of the compound, but now somehow you motherfuckers think it's okay to start ratting because you're in a drug program.
Once again, very Scientology-like.
It is unreal, the mental manipulation, masturbation going on inside prison itself. It is unreal. You have people, fucking inmates control the prisoners more than the COs do. It is fucked.
That is an interesting perspective. Because it does seem like that is a hotbed of just mental manipulation, just for history, historically speaking, in prisons, throughout various mind control experimentations. But yeah, there's some program that I think Scientology gets inserted directly into prison. I can't recall the name of it. It's like Criminon or something like that.
That's
like,
Criminal.
is that it? Criminon? Yeah, and that's initially how like the guy who invented Narconon wrote L. Ron Hubbard because he was a graduate of Criminon, I guess. So he got the Scientology stuff from that, and then wrote L. Ron Hubbard's like, hey, we should use this for drug rehab, and we'll call it Narconon. So yeah, so when folks go to Narconon, that's what they get, the rundown. They get the vitamins, they get the sauna activity. That's a lot of the principles of Scientology. When you first join Scientology, you gotta get clean. You gotta flush everything out. A lot of niacin. But yeah, I think a lot of these ideas get inserted into prison. So it's interesting that they're trying to make you narc on people because, again, it's one of the fundamental concepts of Scientology is narking on people.
It was like so fucked up that like if you didn't, you'd be screwed. So it's like you'd get a couple of your boys together, and it's like you would actually strategically pick what are we going to stand up in the community and rat on each other about.
Oh my God.
Like,
nice.
I saw so and so pick up a fruit off of the table this morning at breakfast because you're only allowed to eat what's on your tray. So if someone left an orange on the table because they didn't want to eat it, you can't pick it up and eat it because you're only supposed to eat what's on your tray. So like you'd pick stupid shit like that. Oh, I saw so and so pick up an orange, so I'm pulling him up. He was blah 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 blah. I mean, it was just fucking like, I can't believe this. We're in prison and we have to tell on each other.
Yeah, it's wild.
Oh, I'm getting time off. Fuck it. Oh, you might have gotten time off too, and now you have a fucking 11K or whatever downward departure, and you probably told on people before you even got in here. It was just fucking unreal.
It's a strange environment. For
pedophiles
sure.
loved it too because you can't say nothing to them now, or you'll get kicked out. So it was like a safe haven for the pedophiles too. It was fucking bizarre.
But there was so much experimentation going on with prison. Even back then, I mean, they used them for so many psychological experiments. I mean,
for sure.
It
I lasted about 2 months.
Many...
I lasted about 2 months and they kicked me out because of an email. Because of an email, they read your fucking emails in there too. I emailed my brother and told him that the guy from Blow and a guy from the Yankees was in the guy Blow called George Young or whatever the fuck his name was, the guy driving the kilos of
George Young, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was actually locked up with him at Fort Dix. And he was there, and a guy from like the Yankees was there, or something else, and some other like kind of known person. And I told him that, and they were like, "Oh, that was like a breach of like security breach that you like mentioned that were in here." And I was like, "What?"
They didn't want you narking about that. They wanted you narking about other stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
They sent me to the fucking shoe for that shit for fucking 90 days, man.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and fucking half the time I was stuck with a fucking chomo in my fucking room. I was like, of course. I was like, now I'm stuck in here with some fucking kid who diddled his own whatever. Just sick shit. And then it's like, I finally see the lieutenant. He's like, what the fuck are you doing in here for this? I said, I don't know. He's like, you're not supposed to be in here.
All because of an email.
The best thing about this is I got to read your emails. And he's like, you motherfuckers in New York got some silly slang. He's like, the way you type it, the shit you and your brother was saying to each other had me fucking dying reading your emails. He's like, I couldn't understand half the shit you were saying because I don't speak your like slang. I'm sorry for like taking over.
No, that's a good story. It sounds like a wild experience.
When it comes to like, that whole drug program shit and that type of style, I think that is like almost like MK Ultra in a sense.
Yeah.
It's
exactly
interesting. It is, yeah. So there's I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Holsinger, and I'm not familiar with what department he worked in at the time, but I read this paper yesterday. It's from I think May 1980, and that coalition, that front group with Children of God, the Moonies, and Scientology, they compiled this sort of presentation, their argument as far as these experiments that were going on in prisons that were disproportionately affecting ethnic minorities, as far as like MK Ultra. And they said, what happened at Jonestown was not what you guys have told everyone. This was a CIA operation. You guys put the commercial goals of the American government over the American people, and here's all of the proof that we have X, Y, and Z. But what they called it, and I thought it was very fascinating, they were discussing Congressman Leo Ryan and his assassination. They said, we think that he was sent there to basically walk into a death trap, and he was about to pierce the religious veil. That's what they called it. And I think that it was a very appropriate sort of description of it, because it was the cloak of religion, right? But that's not really what was going on, because they pointed out that they had a bunch of really weird mind control drugs, the daily medical checkups. They were like, this is MK Ultra. That's not maintained in a prison or a hospital, run by doctors. They're basically just having the lay people do it, so to speak, with a certain amount of protection. And they showed, a report from the coroner in Guyana, Dr. Mutu, I think it is, where over 700 of the people at Jonestown died. They were murdered. They didn't drink any Kool-Aid. There was no arsenic. So it's just an interesting sort of enmeshing of everything, because I'm of the opinion that all the cults are intelligence operations, and I think they're all kind of working together behind the scenes, even if there's like factional fighting presented to the public. I think that that's for public consumption. I don't think that it's real. So.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you 100% there, Dana. That's exactly how I view all this network of cults as well. It's interesting. I was unfamiliar with this coalition you're talking about with the Moonies, especially. They're an interesting bunch. They're deeply connected to the CIA operations for many decades. So that's not a new relationship by any stretch of the imagination. And I think when George Bush #1 took over the CIA in the mid-'70s, I think that whole relationship between the CIA and the Moonies got even stronger, because he was in large part responsible for a lot of those activities. So, and it's interesting also the time frame you're talking about, this coalition occurring with Scientology and, the Mormons, especially. I think these ancient alien cargo cults, as I like to call them, they like to stick together. They like to band as one network. And, it's interesting that the time frame you're talking about this coalition, because that sounds like right at the same time that Operation Snow White was getting busted up by the feds.
Hey, look at that. You are absolutely right, man. Because, people know Operation Snow White. Like, they sometimes say that it's the only redeeming quality of Scientology is like they infiltrated the government and this and that. And I'm like, that part is for public consumption. Obviously, it did serve one purpose. The government saw where all of the holes were, right? So they knew where the problems lied. The idea that the government wasn't fully aware of what was going on, though, to some extent is quite silly, especially after all this time. But in regards to that specifically, the church had internal documents. Mary Sue Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard, they knew what was going on with Charles Manson. They knew what was going on with the process. They were more concerned about Manson. It's very interesting. There is also internal church documents, because keep in mind, I think it was July 7th. Maybe it was July 4th. No, I think it was actually July 7th when they were raided by the FBI. David Berkowitz was not arrested until a little over a month later. For whatever reason, the Church of Scientology has internal documents that they were very worried about the bad press from the crimes that were going on in New York that were later attributed to David Berkowitz. I think that is very bizarre. I don't understand why they would care. Sans the Carr family, right? Because we know that Michael Vale Carr was involved with the church specifically. And that time is when the Guardian's office is getting shut down as well. The CIA is coming in and pulling rank. I think that Michael was a part of the Guardian's office. I think that...
Interesting.
I think that like the Son of Sam letters in particular, because, you know, that stuff with Paulette Cooper, as far as that fake bomb threat to Henry Kissinger that they did.
Mm-hmm.
So like that was a black op that was run on her. That was run out of the same org that Michael Vale Carr was working at. That was all
Oh, I did
happening
not
at the
realize
same
that.
place. Yeah, so it's like they literally faked the fingerprints, everything. It was legit. And I mean, it
Oh
was
yeah,
crazy. Like, you
she
know,
got
Henry
tried twice for it,
Kissinger.
right?
Yeah, yeah, she did.
Yeah,
But
they had
that
a
was legit.
mistrial and then they put her back on trial, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
they were pretty. It was a good frame job. You know, the Scientology Guardian's office had a good frame job there. But that's an interesting outlook. That is the same time frame as the Son of Sam stuff.
it's
And
the
there's
exact
been
same time, and they're very good at forging documents, including fingerprints. And I
sure,
just think when you look at the, you know, two most prominent letters, I think it's the one to the police chief and then the Borelli letter, the newspaper guy. That just doesn't look like a normal letter. That looks very crafted specifically. It just doesn't look like a normal letter, and people can think that I'm anointed, whatever, but it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the Church of Scientology, particularly the Guardian's office, I have shown people documents with policies regarding their black PR campaigns. I think that the Son of Sam letters were a black PR campaign. Now, I don't know if this was waged by the process or if it was waged by the Church of Scientology. I think it's kind of up in the air. My personal opinion right now is I think that the Cars possibly they were kind of screwing around, and David Berkowitz too, but I think that maybe they were screwing around a bit with the process and the heat was starting to come in. And I think that the church ran a black PR campaign as like fair game, legitimate fair game on the
yeah.
Carr family.
No, that makes a lot of sense to what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense to me, and especially, you know, when you say whether or not it's the process or Scientology, I would ask, what's the difference? Because looking back in the FBI records, even in the FBI vault records on the Process Church, they have numerous sources telling the FBI as late as 70, or, you know, going back as far as 71, 72, saying that the process is simply just the, you know, militia, the militant arm of Scientology. So they do the dirty work, the dirtier work than what the Guardian's office does, apparently. Or who knows? Maybe it's one of the same function. Because when you talk about Paulette Cooper and faking that whole bomb threat against Kissinger, they actually broke into, according to FBI reports, they broke in, Scientology's Guardian's office broke into Paulette Cooper's apartment or home and stole her fingerprints off of items in her home and then put those fingerprints onto the bombs, you know, the bomb threat.
That's horrible.
So that's some you know, that's some next level, you know, deviancy as far as plotting an operation against somebody. That's not just, you know, because again, the feds had nothing, no other, you know, they couldn't avoid it. They had to prosecute the lady. I mean, they were convinced she had done it according to all their reports, and for good reason. I mean, all the evidence, including fingerprints, supported that.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's dark.
I think that Paulette Cooper is an important example for people to consider in regards to, like I said, in my opinion, this current disinformation campaign, because I think it would be quite easy for the Church of Scientology, for the Guardian's office, especially if Michael Vale Carr III was a part of the Guardian's office. It would be very easy for them to have access and get access into Berkowitz's home and to set the entire thing up because, you know, people like to focus on, understandably so to an extent, the forensics of the letters with the fingerprints, with these, you know, handwriting analyses, X, Y, and Z. But again, a woman was literally, like you said, tried twice because of a bomb threat to Henry Kissinger. Their skills are par none as far as that kind of stuff goes because the Guardian's office was completely ruthless. But with Operation Snow White going on and the Son of Sam crimes, and this coalition, you know, the Guardian's office is getting shut down. You know, the old guard is sort of getting moved into these new roles, and we have this big takeover going on inside of the church. And I really do think that the Son of Sam was kind of a really big tipping point because I don't think that it should be ignored that they had documents over a month before Berkowitz was arrested and that Operation Snow White happened, you know, before Berkowitz was arrested. It was almost like whoever was pulling the chain at the top of it was pulling rank and shutting it down.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me because, you got my wheels turning regardless of the Mormons, because right after all this takeover from Scientology, the Mormons had a disruption in their hierarchy where there was individuals trying to upset the hierarchy of the Mormon church there in the early 80s with the White Salamander letters, a different bombing that may or may not have included the guy they have in prison for it. And that man actually used to hang out at the Magical Child bookshop in New York City. So directly connected to the same circles as these people at the same time in the late 70s and early 80s. That's exactly when Mark Hoffman, he was a Mormon missionary, and then he went on this campaign after his mission of, allegedly forging all of these documents, including the documents that bring into these this magical ceremonial rituals, and talking to a white salamander is part of the origin story of Joseph Smith locating the golden plates instead of the angel Moroni. But all of that stuff happened immediately following the takeover of Scientology. And it's interesting, again, at the same time, you're saying they're part of a formal coalition as opposed to just the loosely based coalition of being these ancient alien cargo cults. So I just think it's interesting that all these things are these events are happening where the hierarchy of these organizations are being taken out around that same time. And again, much like Paul A. Cooper there's some bomb threats associated with that. There was actual bombings with the Mormon stuff going on. There was 4 or 5 people. I think 3 people that died, but 4 or 5 people that got bombs, I think, or bombed, including the guy himself who's in prison for it.
You guys are talking about like a lot of this stuff. I was starting to think about other things that I've talked about or covered myself, and even something that like you had said, I think the last time you were on, JJ. Sometimes I wonder, like, I would assume we are all probably under the assumption that the Son of Sam was not by himself. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, for sure.
Okay. So like, like if you're going to send a letter in or anything, I would think that also has multiple people behind it. But like, sometimes I do wonder, like, is this like a cult or cultists just like making a point in something that others will understand when you do this type of stuff? Like it made the news, and like, will other cults and occultists be like, just through like the little details and the things that are said or the way people are killed, is that almost like kind of like making a point or making a stance towards someone else? Is it like being publicized? I know you, JJ, you have said before, sometimes you think like what we see is like kind of like different groups that are like occult groups or orders that are maybe just actually arguing with each other. I think
that's exactly, yeah, for sure,
in some way like that. So like I've wondered like this, and then like you're talking about the Mormons, and just like it was something that I thought was really weird that they had their Mountain Meadow Massacre, and that was between September 7th and September 11th. So, I mean, you get 9/11 and Building 7 if you want to kind of look at it like that already. And then you have the MMM, which is also by the Crowley for the Gnostic Massive Church. You have the MMM. So, like, I do want, just I start to wonder about stuff like that. But, like, even with that situation, like, when they went to go prosecute whoever did this, supposedly they were saying the Indians attacked them first, but it was basically the Mormons just slaughtered a bunch of Indians. And they were trying to blame it on the Indians, and then I think they brought some people to court, and it wasn't the Indians, so it was Mormons, and like they had a whole Mormon jury, and they were like, no, they're innocent, of course. But then they picked somebody else who was also Mormon with a full Mormon jury, and then they're like, oh, yes, he did it. So to me, it was just like, you now just like, here's the fall guy. And like back then, I mean, even with Joseph Smith, it's like, if you knocked the guy's teeth out, or blew him, shot him in the face, could you even say that was Joseph Smith that's dead on the ground that fell from the fucking prison anyway? You know what I'm saying?
That's a great point.
Oh, he's got the same badge he was wearing before, the Jupiter sigil. That must be fucking Joseph Smith. Like, how do you know? Right. I mean, he could have been like the first Epstein. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
absolutely.
But like, I just like sometimes these stories almost seem reoccurring. Like even with the Son of Sam, it's like I feel like he was just a fall guy for a group of people. And I feel like Mormons have done that before in the past with the Mountain Meadow Massacre. And it's just like, you see the same stories retold or redone over and over again. And is it to make a public statement sometimes? I don't know. Just weird.
Yeah. That's a good point. Maybe it's an occult group playbook, because again, all these occult groups that you just mentioned, the Mormons, the Scientology, they have or the process for that matter, the offshoot of Scientology, they have roots in some of the same magical texts. So, I mean, maybe there's other philosophies or theology they share on above just some of that underlying ceremonial magical aspects.
There was a question I did want to ask. I don't know if you guys mentioned it before. Where was like the Children of God cult kind of in New York? Do you know like exactly what area?
I'm still familiarizing myself with
Okay.
it. I
Yeah,
know that they
I've
had
never
a few
really heard a
locations.
specific area, but it just there's like the reason I ask is because I feel like once you hit Westchester and start going up, there's like a line of just like the weirdest shit. You got cults and Joseph Smith, but serial killers. It's like this just line up this one area of New York where it's just like, is this like a ley line for strange weird shit? So I'm wondering like if
You
that
got
if
the
into that, kind of that ladder of weirdness.
Speaking
you got the
of
guy that
children,
funded all the LSD stuff with Timothy Leary up there.
I was just
Melton
gonna,
Hitch. Oh, go ahead.
no. I was just going to say to your point of LSD and then Children of God. So Children of God, and we were talking about before the stream how it got started at a coffee house on 211 Main Street down on Huntington Beach. And they were meeting or whatever, and it started off with Teen Challenge or whatever, and then it kind of morphed into whatever. But down the street, like a block over, was the Golden Bear, was where all of the new psychedelic music had started up, and it was starting in that time frame. So where Janis Joplin, The
Interesting.
Doors, all of them were coming in and out, and they said that it was the site to, do psychedelics and listen to psychedelic music. So, and it was literally the block over. So I found that interesting that was occurring at the same time when all of that other Church of God was kicking off as well. So, and then moving to New York, that it would be associated again still with psychedelics of the making, so to speak.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think LSD is like an underlying plot of all these
Yeah.
groups.
I do too.
It was Mellon Hitchcock was the guy I was trying to think of in the Hudson River Valley. He had the big banking families, railroad magnate families. He's an heir to those fortunes. He was the guy that was funding Timothy Leary for many years, and a lot of the LSD stuff. I forget he had a name for his organization or club or estate, but yeah, LSD seems to be the underlying aspect of a lot of these, the plot line of a lot of these groups.
I think
I'm unfamiliar with the Children of God being in that same mix, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was just experimentation. I think the inception of the CIA was the OSS, which was the Nazis, and they were the people conducting experiments. They loved human trials, they loved experimentation, and it's no different. I think the CIA has never stopped experimenting on people, whether it was in prison, cults, psychology, health, all kinds of stuff, and these were just offshoots of what happens when this happens, and
Sure.
and let's go ahead and create this entire different experimental designs within all of these factions, within all of these groups, and then it just feeds the data back, whether it's to DARPA, whether it's a Black Ops or what have you, but then also funnel in some sort of funding and diversify their portfolio. I mean, it was the best of all worlds for them, I think, in my opinion.
Sure. No, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
even,
Go ahead, Nick.
well, I've just
go ahead.
wondered myself, like you said before, and I agree. I do think a lot of these things probably are CIA or some three-letter agency or something behind it. But like sometimes I do think, like again, if it's working and you happen to come across it, like why not? Let's just see how it works.
Right.
We'll just watch them. Hey, we'll even send somebody in there, not to bust them, to take notes.
Right.
This motherfucker's they know how to control thousands of people.
All right.
And then like
I'm
it
sure.
gets far and gets fucked up. Even the CIA knew it was fucked up, but they allowed it to get fucked up because they wanted to just learn from them. I think that happens too.
I think so too.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some instances of that. I mean, it kind of the way you explain that kind of reminds me of the SLA and Donald. Is it Donald DeFreeze? Dana knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, because that was kind of how they developed, the way you just explained it, and how they developed as an organization. They were kind of propped up and and a new leader DeFreeze was the new leader that was inserted into the organization once the CIA got control of it. But I think the way you explained it, that makes a lot of sense. That some of these instances, these cults are already doing their cult thing, and then they get overtaken in some instances where they're just manufactured wholesale. And sometimes it's tough to find out in between which ones are in between. But yeah, I think the way Lisa put it's a good way to describe that too. The divesting the portfolio of these cults amongst intelligence agencies. That's because they probably all serve slightly different functions internally for an intelligence agency operation. And again, when one intelligence agency does something to the other one, then their cults probably have to, counteract, and it's an ongoing feud. It's the way I kind of perceive it.
I've even said this before. I even think in with true crime, and I do actually seriously question the Idaho 4 case. I think that could literally be like I guess the way it's being played out is more of like a side effect, I think, of data analysis from like magicians and 3-letter agencies.
Oh man, I like that idea.
I really do think, because even if you just have to spend a few minutes on YouTube and you can see that you got some shady magician motherfuckers that have like are creating stories out of, it's just hard to explain, but you can easily, like, there's a huge worship thing with this. People are really stuck on that case, and there's money getting involved now. And it's just, to my opinion, I do sometimes question if it is actually like, just data analysis on growing cult hive minds from the fucking TV screen. And not even, you know what I'm saying? I know it sounds crazy, but I really do.
No, I don't think it sounds crazy.
I don't think so.
No, I think,
yeah. I mean, there's so many papers put out about, serial killers and mass murders and whatever. And I think you and I both had talked about it, and how like the only thing that's missing is real-time data. How does it manipulate the masses? How does it manipulate society? Does this sway them into purchasing this kinds of things or what have you? So yeah, I mean, all of it is just data. I think that's the new currency, is data. Nothing else. Oil, it has surpassed oil by leaps and bounds.
So, oh yeah.
Yeah, it's, and like just from my opinion, like some of like the biggest accounts, on YouTube, it is what it is. We know there's a lot of bullshit on YouTube, but a lot of the biggest accounts to me are blatantly occultist too. And they happen to spin like the best emotions and stories out of something that you really don't. You know what I'm saying? Like when Brian Kohlberg is smiling in a courtroom, you don't know what he's smiling about. But you'll get some people that get their listeners believing, oh, he's smiling because he knows he didn't do it, and that the lawyer. Blah, blah.
Oh yeah.
You never met fucking Brian Kohlberger, bro. Right. You never met these girls that died. You didn't know who these people were until the TV told you they existed. So stop acting like you know what they are thinking and feeling from fucking photos on Facebook. You're creating a story, you're creating emotions, and now you're selling it and hitting that monetize button. That's all they're about.
Oh, yeah.
They're magicians who understand how to sell shit to cult-like people. That's what it is. It really is what it is that I see.
But I agree with all your points there for sure, Nick. But I think there might be something like even like a larger scale, like data, data-driven.
I think they know exactly
like program,
and they're riding the wave.
Yeah, exactly.
They know what's up, and they're like, "Yo, I'm gonna get in on this too."
Exactly. Yeah. No. Exactly. Because this Idaho 4 case I've never seen anything grasp attention across various continents as this case has amongst true crime. I mean, I realize true crime is a very popular community, and a lot of cases attract a lot of attention, but this one specifically seems to have like reached a new level. And I think to a certain degree, there is people interested in whether or not, where they fall in the spectrum of, when they insert themselves in that process, who knows? But there's people interested in all that data and what's attracting people's attention. I think some of it is more manufactured than others. There was an incident where this one lady, a YouTuber or a TikToker, I don't recall, one of the two, was accusing one of the history teachers of the University of Idaho of murder. I believe this is still an ongoing defamation lawsuit from the history teacher to this YouTuber. But I find it interesting that they're both characters involved in that saga, because it was such a ridiculous saga. The TikToker lady was saying she was doing like tarot card readings, and the tarot card readings told her that this history teacher from the university was the murderer, or something in that regard. Anyway, it spawned these lawsuits, but it almost spawned them so quickly, and the whole thing happened so fast in December of last year, about a month after the murders, that it seemed like it was, to me, it seemed like it was an effort to shut down any talk of this case or dissent amongst the official storyline. You look what's going to happen to you. You're going to get sued, or that kind of thing. If you even talk about this case in any way that's not the official narrative. Because, and I just say that because both these characters involved, the TikToker, tarot card lady, and the history professor, were both sorority members when they were in college. They both were, or they still are, because it's a lifelong membership, I suppose. But they both belong to two different sororities, and I'm sure Nick's deeply familiar with my thoughts on how ingrained this Greek culture is into that Idaho situation and drug trafficking in general on college campuses. So I thought it was odd that you see. So speaking to the possible manufactured nature of some of this data analytics regarding the true crime, specifically at Idaho 4, I often wonder if there's not organizations that are inserting themselves, like, let's get two of these people that are part of our club, part of the sorority, part of our club, and let's get them to start this thing and see what this data brings us as far as analyzing the events that go on around that, because I'm sure to a certain extent it does dispel any dissent as far as questioning the official narrative, and that's a case where the official narrative, doesn't survive much questioning.
I've often thought, though, that the Son of Sam and the Zodiac were possibly done on purpose anyway, just to freak the.
Sure.
Well,
that's the impetus of that's the stated mission of the Process Church, to create chaos. So
that it is.
In fact,
that it is.
One of the clips, I believe it was one of the Maury Terry interviews with David Berkowitz. I think he got cut out of the Netflix special, The Sons of Sam. But if you listen to the podcast, the accompanying podcast that Siemens did, the director of the documentary, he includes it in that, and you can find, I think, clips of the actual interview, the full-length interview, on YouTube, or used to be able to. And Berkowitz has explained to Terry, like he's like, why are you asking him? Terry's asking Berkowitz, why was the cult doing this? What was their goal? And he explains to the extent of their goal was to bring on chaos, because the Antichrist can't be born into a world that's not chaotic. They have to have chaos to bring on the Antichrist. And
Absolutely.
I think that is what the process does, right, Dana? I mean, that's their main focus.
Absolutely.
Even when they were the foundation
theology.
faith, right?
Yes.
Like, it didn't matter what sign was out front, right? It
Absolutely.
could be the process, it could be foundation faith. It's the same mission, right?
It doesn't matter. That's like my gripe, I guess, with people being so insistent that they undid or that they dissolved or disbanded. That's just simply not true. They did a fantastic sort of strategic move from the get-go with, all of these gods that they believe in, because I think that they were playing the long game. Ultimately, yes, the worship and sacrifice and other things with animals, that is the natural conclusion or progression of their theology. But I mean, a domestic sort of like terrorism, domestic gladio operation like the Son of Sam, maybe some other crimes down the road, because I'm going to explore every crazy name that is in those files, because I think it's worth exploring. But there's a lot of money at stake. And I think that the LSD angle that you guys were talking about is a really strong angle as well, because Timothy Leary was a part of the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. And that was a global trafficking. Yeah, I mean, that's a global trafficking network. And specifically, one of the informants between Ed Sanders and Maury Terry, there's a major crossover, particularly in Cielo Drive. I think it was one of the underlings of Ronald Stark specifically, was Ronald Stark owned the vehicle, and it was one of his informants that was driving around with Manson, getting rid of drugs, X, Y, and Z. And this person has identified the tie. We're still trying to figure out who the actual person is and what their actual name is, because it's really difficult to do so. But there are some ties to the Son of Sam as well, and that makes sense, because the process, that was Manson, right? And then we're going over here, and it does appear that, in my opinion, David Berkowitz was a part of the process. We know that Michael Carr was involved in Scientology, but I also think that he was getting mixed in with the process too. I also think that John Carr was a part of the process, quite frankly. This delineation between like the 4P, 4Pi, like the children, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because the cloak of the four gods, that's giving them what they need. And that's all just factional nonsense. The fact of the matter is, yes, domestic gladio, domestic terrorism, drug trafficking. And something that I did want to mention really quick to you, Lisa. So an anonymous source had sent me this fascinating paper. I wanted to get your take on it in regards to the German shepherds that were being slain at the time. So there are studies out there, and I am going to be honest with you, I don't really understand them that well. It's very confusing. But apparently German Shepherds have a higher level of oxytocin naturally in their blood.
Okay.
And that's that's your happy drug.
And it
right?
allows them to bond with their owner more so, and then establish that working relationship.
Right. So it was just an interesting consideration that someone had presented to me, because they sent me a few papers and, they said people have called me crazy. I said, I don't think it's crazy at all, because I think they're doing crazy stuff out in Utah right now. And that would make sense if that is part of the, sacrificial angle. Because
that would be something to look into, actually, because if I don't know when I off the top of my head, I don't know when oxytocin was discovered, but oxytocin does play into a lot of ritualistic bonding, because it is the main hormone that is secreted during milk letdown, during mother nursing, and then it is the main hormone that is secreted during orgasm. So it would be interesting to look to see if they were using Alsatians for their oxytocin.
And it sounds like that'd be an important hormone in a sex magical ritual.
Absolutely.
So.
Yes.
There you go.
That's exactly.
So I'm thinking about stuff with. I mean, even Gilgo Beach, that was a German Shepherd that found the first body. Fucking Biden, he's got a problem with his German Shepherd. Like, I have questioned like German Shepherds. Like, I don't know, do you have that dog for a reason, or is that just being put in the news lines for a reason?
Sure.
Well,
there was actual other animal sacrifice. I don't think it was German Shepherds though. That was discovered by Rex's house, right? Do you recall that one, Nick?
Yes.
It was discovered in 1909, so they would have known by then.
Interesting.
Oh, the oxytocin. Nice.
Very interesting. I absolutely think it's worth exploring.
I would definitely love to explore that, if you don't mind. Look into that. That would be a very interesting angle.
Again, like, now that's in their blood. You're saying? I mean, again, like
for the pituitary.
I did say, like, when I had my issue and I went to the hospital, like, I did have blood issues. They had to give me a bag of saline and a bag of blood, because my hemoglobin, they said, was like high enough to where it was like, they're like, yo, your blood was almost like serum. They're like, and they were like, is this like a problem? Like, is this happening to you? There was a certain name, I forgot what it was. They're like, are you so and so? And I was like, no, I don't even know what that means. Like, they thought like maybe I was somebody that would go, like, supposedly there's this issue that people will have where we'll get like that, and they go once a month, they get a couple of bags of blood and it thins them out. I was like, no,
really?
I don't have that problem. That's not me. But they said it was jacked up to like 19.3 or 19.6.
Damn.
And I was just, they said normal should be like, 14 to 16. And I said, I don't know, and then that's when I had one pupil was bigger than the other as well. And they didn't know what the fuck was up with that.
And you don't know what caused this?
I really do chalk it up to me fucking around with magic. I really do. It's just crazy.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. Because this all happened. I thought I was losing my mind, or I was like, I don't know, there was something wrong with me. My body didn't feel right. Yeah. I felt like I had electricity running up and down my legs. My head felt like it was going to pop, like it was an overcharged battery. And I was like, yo, I got to go to the hospital. I was like, one pupil's fucking big, the other one's small. I was like, what the fuck is wrong? And then I was there for 3 days, and they're like, we think you had a migraine. So they gave me shit for migraine. And they're like, we think you might have this, whatever I was explaining that you probably understood, Dana, what I was saying. So they made me go see someone. They checked my levels and I was fine. And this was probably about 3 weeks after I left the hospital. I went back again 3 months later. They were fine. And they said, don't come back. They said, it must have just been some random thing. They're like, your blood is fine. So I don't know what that was about. But to me, and they always talk about, I don't even want to use the word chrome. You know what I'm saying? I do think that is like a way to, it's magic where it's like, don't look over here, but look over there.
Yeah, no, magician's
put the rabbit in the hat before I pull it out. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I think there is something up with it, but I think the direction that a lot of people are going is completely off and on. But from my experiences, because of my own thing, I do think there is something up with blood when it comes to magic, and something depleting or something, I don't know, something weird.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
So like, it makes me question, like, blood in the end, the dogs.
Yeah.
What else?
That means that they had to have been testing them. That means that somebody had to have tested for that. I think the Germans. I think the Nazis. They were into experimentation. They loved it.
Yeah.
So.
They also love German Shepherds, right?
And they were very good at it. I'm not gonna lie, they were very good at it. Most of the what we know about pain today comes from Nazi experimentation. So.
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I guess this might be a good time to try to segue over into, I guess, JJ's connection to the Beatles that you had to talk about.
Oh yeah, well I left that off the last time or last discussion regarding the music industry and their connections to specifically. I mean, you can throw in the Scientology connections there too, but specifically the Process Church connections. And the Process Church and the Beatles are, they have a history and origin story that are very much intertwined. Hard to separate the two. In fact, they even the Beatles used to employ the manager for their little boutique operation, their little store they had there in London, the Apple boutique, and their on staff astrologer was a member of the Process Church. So this is all, well, what would become the Process Church is what I should say, because it was technically compulsions analysis at the time. However, it makes you wonder where the onset of some of the garb worn by the Process, specifically the cloaks. I really wonder where that begins, because right around the same time where the process, or the proto process, the compulsions analysis, the organization that preceded it, same people though, they're trying to recruit the Beatles at the same time in a very L. Ron Hubbard recruit the celebrities kind of mentality. And at the same time, the Beatles are making the album Help, where they wear, not specifically looking like the Process cloaks, but they for some reason are all wearing cloaks in their movie that accompanies the album.
Yo,
that very odd.
And every pose they're making is a grade sign or an elemental sign. Magic.
Oh, interesting.
Every single one is.
Yeah, I think much of what the Beatles produced is all deeply rooted in the occult. I mean, you can just, on a surface level, you can look at the Sgt. Pepper's band, see Crowley on there. You can infer that they're talking about Crowley when they're talking about who Sgt. Pepper is, because 20 years ago today, Sgt. Pepper taught the band to play. Well, that was 20 years after Crowley had died. That's 1967, I believe it is, versus 1947 when Crowley died. So I think there is some inference to be made there that they may in fact be talking and referencing Crowley as Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah,
however, no, go ahead.
Even looking just at the album cover real quick, I'm looking at what they're doing. The first guy's going like this, and this is in the LVX formula for the hexagram ritual. You see the sign of Osiris slain. And then this one, eventually, you go into the next guy, the sign of Apophis and Typhon. Same thing for the LVX formula. Instead of making a swastika, which is the original, you can make an L for the sign of the morning of Isis, which is what she's doing right there. And then the sign of Earth. Then the sign of Earth is basically what Hitler was doing. Just putting your hand out like that. That is the symbol of Earth. So my opinion,
that album covers those are all occult symbols and are occult. Yes. They're the armor signals they're making.
You can go into Liber O by Crowley and see all those symbols being done with a guy wearing a black robe instead.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And again, so maybe their veneration of Crowley obviously then predates the Sgt. Pepper's years. It was, they could have already been schooled in the Crowley religions, if you will, whatever variation it may be prior to that, but dating back to the time where they're intermingling with the Process. And this is a circle of people that includes folks like in London at the time, included folks like Marianne Faithfull, which I'm sure Dana's familiar with, the connection between the Process and Marianne Faithfull.
Yes.
And they famously, singer, Mick Jagger's girlfriend, or I believe actually wife, I think at one point. I think they were married. So these are very prominent people that they're associating with. She was a cover of one of the Process Church magazines, which those are some disturbing. If any folks of the interwebs have not seen the Process Church magazines, there's some disturbing material, basically. I mean, another one besides just the ideas of chaos and death that are perpetrated throughout or fear. I think that was the issue with Marianne Faithfull. Besides these general concepts that are obviously rampant throughout all of their publications, they highlight Jimmy Savile in one of their publications, who's at the time wasn't known to be this arch pedophile, and who knows, he's supposedly having sex with dead bodies or whatever in some morgue at some hospital. Lots of very disturbing stories behind Jimmy Savile, but he was highlighted in the process literature in the 60s. So
on their
this
sex
is the
issue. Just so
Was that the
everyone
sex
knows, it
issue?
was their sex. It was their sex issue.
Nice.
So
Well, that's
yeah.
even more disturbing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's not a group, but this is the era where the Beatles are thriving. They're intermingling with these people. They're hanging out with Marianne Faithfull, and I think her first husband, John Dunbar, was the fellow's name. He was actually the son of I believe a State Department official, kind of that whole Laurel Canyon kind of children of the military industrial complex kind of situation or circumstances. So Dunbar, and he owns a cafe or an art gallery and cafe with Paul McCartney's girlfriend's brother. And so this is an area they're all hanging out because of these relationships. And that's also at that same gallery, the Indica Gallery, the Process Church was known to hang out there. That was their normal hangout spot. So this is also the environment where John Lennon meets Yoko Ono. So there's this whole, it gets hard to separate the story of the Process in this era from the Beatles. I mean, they're all thriving at the same time in London, and in fact, while the Process goes into Los Angeles, California, so do the Beatles. They're very much part of the Laurel Canyon scene. So there's an extension that continues on past their origin story. And again, I think regarding the Beatles and some of their LSD connections, I think that's again something that's an underlying plot line of all these groups, and whether or not the Beatles were actually members of the Process remains to be proven. However, again, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence to show that they were deeply involved within the same society and social circles as the Process Church. But I'll also point out that George Harrison he actually sued a number of newspaper publications for printing articles and pictures claiming he was a fan of Hitler and the Nazis. This happened, I think maybe 25 years ago, maybe late 90s. So George, that would being a fan of Hitler and the Nazis, that would go in line with being a member of the Process Church. Those two things would go hand in hand. So whether or not George Harrison was a member or not of the Process, again, remains to be seen, but it seems to have espoused the same values as the Process. So a lot of stuff back and forth there. But another friend of the Beatles was Timothy Leary, as we discussed before, the quote unquote LSD guru. And, he's connected to all these different groups. Dana, I forget the name of the group, the
Brotherhood of Eternal Love.
There we go. The Brotherhood of Eternal Love. Thank you. Yeah. These are the main perpetrators of the LSD, and he's obviously integrated with that. And they're obviously dealing business, it seems, with all these different cult groups who seem to be trafficking in drugs, including those are the allegations that have surrounded the Process for many years. That was one of their main financial avenues was apparently the trafficking of drugs. And again, LSD being a primary drug that they would allegedly distribute and traffic. However, you look at people like Timothy Leary, he's just another occultist as well, and it kind of makes sense to me why he falls in the same group. I believe he famously was quoted as saying that he felt that he was carrying on the tradition of Aleister Crowley, which I think is a weird statement to make, just generally speaking, because he's not publicly really known as an occultist. But if you listen to him speak, I mean, he makes comments like that, and you're like, wait a second, something more to this guy.
Yeah.
So, Beatles, again, I don't know what it is other than just maybe marketing. I'm sure there's some more, deeper and darker, issues of why these cults are so focused on music groups, or movies or media in general. But I feel like that it's pretty obvious that the Beatles in the Process, while they're not like famously known today as being kind of the same storyline. I don't see them as a separate storyline, really. No different than I don't see Manson in the Process as a separate storyline. I see them as these things didn't happen. You don't have Charles Manson over here and the Process over here, and they're just operating in a vacuum. They're operating in the same environment at the same time, doing the same things, and even claiming to be the same people when it comes to
Absolutely.
Manson and to Grimston.
I agree completely. Caleb Rupert Ashburton Dunning is the Process member who was the astrologer, right?
Yep.
And like one of the narratives that is given is that he predicted that things weren't going to work out with Yoko Ono. And so they booted him. And I'm like, well, that's interesting, isn't it?
Right.
Because, you know, but they still, that's something that I think was like for public consumption. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that the relationship goes way back because as far as like Carnaby Street, you know, because De Grimston was like the Christ of Carnaby Street. I think Mary Ann, maybe Yoko, and maybe a couple other gals, that might have been like a honeypot operation going on at the time because the Perfumo affair was going on.
I think so too.
So I have like a theory that maybe Yoko was also a honeypot for obviously someone else.
So
but
too. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, certainly a good possibility. She was always up to some nefarious activities relative to the to geopolitics in general. She always seemed to have her hands, you know, in various areas of the world where, you know, possibly doing spook type activities is what I'm getting at. She, again, you know, I think these people, you know, especially the Beatles. I mean, they're up there, if not above Tom Cruise's ability to get into places around the world. You know, there are a lot, you know, if you want somebody who can infiltrate into another country, that's a great mechanism for an intelligence agency to use these cultists, especially the celebrity ones, because they can insert them just about anywhere. And I mean, there's probably not too many, you know, countries the Beatles aren't, you know, immediately recognizable. You know, they're definitely a global brand, no different than Tom Cruise.
You know, something I had also wondered about. You know, I do know like they have the Crowley, you know, the Crowley thing in the was that Magical Mystery Tour? You said it before. He's on the album cover, or Sgt. Pepper. Sorry, was
Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah, Sgt. Pepper's. Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. Though, I'm gonna let you finish your point. I hate to interrupt you, but I'm glad you mentioned the Magical Mystery Tour. That just reminded me of something.
I sometimes do wonder, like, if it's more of like the Astrum Argentum instead of like, because I know a lot of people when they think of Crowley, they'll automatically go to like the O.T.O. But sometimes I do wonder if it's really more of like the Astrum Argentum that might actually be like the occult idea behind it. You know, because they are actually a lot more of a secret society. Like you wear hoods and only have eyes. Like, you know, you could actually not even know who the fuck you're around with when you're there. Really? So I mean, yeah, I do think it's quite possible. Like there's a cult that one day I'll eventually get to it that I'm looking at in Brazil. And I mean, and this is like another thing that you mentioned before that I wanted to say. I had thought about getting into it because it was a little bit more, you were actually given like a mentor and like you had to read certain shit. You actually had to study. The O.T.O. wasn't like that, which I thought it was going to be like. And so I started looking maybe into the Astrum Argentum because I knew a lot of it was like through like online correspondence. You really didn't even talk to anybody until you had to go to something. Really? You know, yeah. But and eventually I never did it. Well, I mean, for multiple reasons. One of them was just like the amount of lists of books that you had to read and then the fucking questions they gave you. It was just like, come on, you know, but whatever. And that was just to become a student. But like the main one that the O.T.O. will recognize, because there is a bunch of different lines, is the one that's in London. And the way that you get in contact with them, they may have changed it. You actually had to mail them a letter to London, and then they mailed you back. Like this was like through mail correspondence. It wasn't even on the fucking line. So, you know, it's very secretive to me. But like, you know, I have wondered, like you're talking about London, like, you know, for all you know, and Crowley is in the mix. Maybe it's really more of Astrum Argentum than like an O.T.O. thing. You know,
sure,
like
I
was looking at this cult in Brazil that has, to my opinion, blatant Golden Dawn and blatant O.T.O. symbolism. And the Astrum Argentum is a combination of the Golden Dawn and the O.T.O.
Okay.
And then like I actually found like a guy in the background with like an Astrum Argentum hood and robe on. Like when I finally cover it, you'd be like, oh, that dude was actually like sneaking. Like you could tell, like it was like behind a drape, like on a National Geographic picture. I was just like, is that something in the drape? And I zoomed it in, and you see a fucking dude wearing the same fucking hood that I had, because I bought one of the robes regardless, because I thought they were gangster looking anyway. So I bought one anyway for $250. It came from fucking Spain. You know, it looks like I'm a fucking like some ninja, like magical ninja, or whatever, with this thing.
Nice. I want to be a magical ninja.
Yeah. We all do.
Right. Oh, is that it?
Yeah. I mean,
oh, nice.
Ashes on it and stuff from like. Yeah, I had it, but yeah, I mean, like, who doesn't want to wear this when they're doing like fucking rituals? You know, you look fucking crazy, you know.
It's not that dissimilar from the
I
Zodiac
bought one
code,
anyway,
right?
even though I never joined it. But I saw a dude wearing that, hiding behind like these drapes in this picture of this cult in National Geographic, and I was like, "That's the Astramagentum." Now I know what the fuck's going on. You're all being mind fucked in some UFO bullshit savior shit. You are being mind fucked by occultists. Now I know what's going on.
Nice.
That was a way of them showing you this is what's up. Is that guy standing there? That's my opinion.
No, it makes sense. I mean, it would be like a head nod, yeah, for sure.
And,
if I was paying attention.
I was trying to look for the London area for the Astramagentum, and I stumbled across at least 5 orders in Brazil. So I mean, it's just starting to make sense now. So I would
because of
wonder,
the German roots. You think it's because of the Nazi roots of Brazil that brought that the Crowleyism? What do you call it? The Astromagenta? I don't know the name of it.
Astramagentum. Well, I just think that when it starts, if you want to manipulate people really good, I mean, you're gonna have to have a magician somewhere.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I do think sometimes it's just, those are people that might be a little bit better at understanding magic. And I'm not saying that because they're following Crowley. I think the shit existed before him anyway. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I don't buy that he started it. So
I do think it's weird that it's always in something to do with indigenous people as their followers, or something to the akin of, let's just say, Native Americans, Africans, Indonesians. I mean, the Mormons do it. All of these cults that we're talking about, they all prey upon these types of people. I don't know if it's because of their more closeness earthly wise. I don't, or they're easily manipulated. I have no idea. But it just seems like it's commonplace in these areas.
Yeah.
Brazil's a huge one for cults. Huge. And it's right next
yeah.
to Guyana. So
I also think from my experience in the O.T.O, which, this is another reason why I was like even wondering about other things we talked about before with just like data processing or just, just reading people's minds. My experience in the O.T.O, there was a few times when I really do think that there is actually like the members are actually being studied and seeing how they react and stuff. Like when COVID came, a lot of it moved to Zoom. And because they went shut down and listened to the CDC, even though they're magicians, they were afraid of COVID. So like, I thought that was weird, but like they started, and I hate that I always use Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's just like a real easy way to explain Alcoholics Anonymous. Their whole thing is we don't give a flying fuck about anything outside of AA. That's all we're here to talk about. Which I mean, I think AA possibly could have been inspired by Crowley anyway. We're not even going to go there, but a whole other cult in itself, believe it or not, even though it does help people. But I do think where I was going with this, they started doing things on Zoom classes that was almost like when the shit with George Floyd came out. They had to have a thing about George Floyd and wanted to get people's feelings and like, have you experienced racism before? And I'm like, this has nothing to do with magic at all. And then like you started getting somebody who was a lawyer in the group started fucking ranting about how if they considered Antifa domestic terrorists, our constitutional rights are going out the window. So like now we're promoting Antifa. We're on George Floyd. Now we're on Antifa. Now BLM comes up. Now when do people want to start, getting together to protest? This is where this whole fucking 1 hour went. And I said, this is not O.T.O anymore. And at one point prior to that, when you make the second degree and as you start going up, they're going to start expecting you to do more shit. So like I was already like getting involved in the Gnostic Mass just to get people off my back and do something easy. And then like I heard like, like when after you've made the second degree, you can take this, like, I think it's like a year thing where you get in contact with like the main outerhead, Sabazias, and you talk to him and you Skype with him and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking like, all right, maybe it's like once a month. I can do that. It will fucking look good. People, oh my God, you have to talk to Sabazias. Who cares?
Who's that? Who's Sabazias?
He's like the outer head guy. He's the main guy. He's the guy who wrote me a letter and fucked up his punctuality, kicking me out of the fucking order. It's just like, dude, you typed worse than me.
He runs your like the local chapter, or like he runs like a regional guy?
Oh God, to try to get into explaining, he's kind of like, yeah, because then there's like other people, and it's like it's kind of almost like they have. Then there's also people that really shouldn't, like, really don't have much to do with the order at all, that make sure it just runs correctly, so you have non-biased
Oh.
people making sure that it just runs. But
Scientology does that too.
Where I was going with this, oh, you had to talk to that guy every week. And I had spoken to somebody at my lodge who did it, and he was just basically telling me, he was like, oh yeah, he just like wants to know like what's kind of going on, how's the people acting, like what's kind of like the way people are thinking, is people happy? And I'm like, yo, this sounds a little fucking weird. And then there was like somebody else that I knew from following on Facebook that was like some chick that was like even higher than me and literally knew jack shit about magic. And I'm assuming the only reason she got so far is when they had Noticons, her and her husband let people run trains on her. So, that's how I guess you can get up the ladder as well. But she was telling me that she had the same thing and that she did it. Oh, it's great. I could definitely recommend you to him, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yo, this motherfucker is collecting data. If you're doing it every fucking week, I mean, I mean, let's be real. I mean, if people
like confessional at that point
knew what the O.T.O was, I mean, literally every week, what is there for me to tell you? I saw some titties at the Gnostic Mass. It was cool. It was a good week. Oh, maybe we did a day on fucking planetary magic on Saturn. It was really cool. Like, what the fuck is there to tell you about every week, dude? Like, unless you're looking for like fucking specifics, you want to know how people are thinking. No, I guarantee you there's people around that are listening to everything and you have no idea because they got to go tell Sabazias what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Were you holding two cans while you're doing this activity? Were you holding two cans?
Yeah, I'm going clear. Yeah, to make sure you're not lying to him, too. Yeah, I got to hold this shit. Make sure I'm not lying to you. So.
I think it's interesting, the George Floyd, like, Black Lives Matter thing, because a long time ago, before I ever started doing research, like, in a public manner, I went down this, like, really crazy rabbit hole. So the 3 founders of BLM, they are priestesses of the Yoruba tribe, and that whole say their name, they say that is an incantation, and what that does is that allows they don't know who it's going to be in the public square, but someone is going to take on the spirit of that deceased person, and then that deceased person is going to get vengeance. So it kind of makes sense, all the public property damage at that time. A lot of people were engaging in what they deemed as black magic rituals, like en masse. It was really crazy. So,
were they out of California?
I had no idea.
Didn't they live in California or something, like in that area? No.
I don't remember where all of them lived. I mean, and obviously the controversy with what happened later on is a different topic, but the roots of them being interviewed saying that they are Yoruba practitioners, and that, if you listen after you hear this interview and they're saying this incantation, and you hear them in public, they are adding this accentuation to the say their name, say his name, say her name. They're adding this weird little part to Yase. So it's like Yase, and that is supposed to, bring them back for their reckoning. It's interesting, but a deep rabbit hole.
That sounds like a deep rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
What is it? I always wonder with these groups, whether BLM or the process, either one, or these are just 2 examples. They all seem to espouse Marxist ideals, and I've always wondered what that's about, because the declared mission of the process is no different than the declared mission of BLM. They will erase the middle class. They will destroy the bourgeois middle class, which again, that kind of goes back to a Marxist ideal before either of those groups. I just find it strange how all these cults seem to, they cause chaos. The process is a espoused chaos cult, but BLM created a bunch of chaos. It's not. I did not know they had some occult origins, but I'm not shocked. There just seems to be some sort of chaos Marxist kind of intertwined nature of these groups that seems to continue to permeate. Doesn't matter if race or socioeconomic class. It seems to attract, these different groups seem to attract. I think that's the diversity in the cult groups. You have different groups for different racial and social and economic backgrounds.
Well, going back to the whole cult thing that we said at the beginning, how they're studying black psychology, and then we have BLM and Antifa going all over again. I mean, it all seems related. It all seems like the target species or the target subjects of the experiment are the same ones over and over and over again.
Yeah, I thought it was weird, and you're mentioning like Marxism and stuff, JJ. So, like, I know even in the past, and the Occult Rejects, when me and Lux were doing it a while ago, there were times that, like, we would cover people. I can't even remember exactly what their reason we were looking at them, but they were tied to, one of them was a Shakespeare book, people's opinions on Shakespeare. I remember that. But, like, you will get people, or, like, people in secret societies or stuff with, they'll go to these Catholic looking, colleges or universities. As soon as you go on, fucking crosses, gold everywhere, inside of a church. Looks beautiful. But then, like, in part of, like, their thing that they're doing for a year, they go over to Goethe University in fucking Germany. And now you're, like, learning about Marxism and pushing, and you come back and you start pushing fucking LBGTQWIX and fucking, COVID and fucking climate change. It's like, yo, where you're sending these people is nothing like the image of what your university looks like.
It's
sure. Very weird. And it's like, is this just a cover up? Like, we're looking, I don't know.
That's definitely, college campuses are definitely a Marxist breeding ground. There's really no question about that. In this day and age,
I was looking on the university thing, and I threw it into the Wayback Machine because I wanted to look at all this stuff. And, like, it might even still be on there now. Like, how, like, some sites will have, like, suggested sites or partners. Working Families,
Sure.
Working Families, whatever was on there, and I clicked on it. I was like, that sounds familiar. I was like, oh, I'm looking at it. I'm like, well, there was a kid in my fucking lodge that was involved in this, and there is AOC fucking pushing it.
Really?
Yeah, that shit's huge, and it's a fucking its section is probably from the Goethe University, and it's being pushed by the radical left.
That's crazy.
So why do you think the O.T.O. like got taken over by these Marxist kind of ideals? Like, what was that? Did that happen? Like, did you see that happening? Was it like that when you first joined? You know what I mean? Like, was this a transition at some point?
It just seemed like I didn't
like
really notice
COVID hit, and
yeah, it was around then. I just started seeing a lot of weird stuff, and, like, there was just a lot of people that I think you also kind of, like, politics, and COVID was so politicized that I think even started seeing, like, a lot of what people's opinions were about stuff.
That's what I was getting at. I was like, maybe it was just a sign of the times versus like a collective effort to insert Marxism into the O.T.O.
I mean, there was people who had no problem literally putting the word communist under their face and their Facebook.
Oh wow!
It was straight like that, and that's someone who's talking to Sabazius every week. That dude.
I like this guy's name, Sabazius.
All right, sorry to fucking derail the whole thing.
Can I insert something?
Yeah.
Shameless plug. We did a bit on Sid Barrett, and he actually had he had a biography put out. Not a biography. There's a biography that was put out, and the foreword was done by Genesis Peorage, and I found that to be very interesting, considering the whole LSD thing, and then Genesis, and
sure.
The blip on it was that his dad was a world-renowned pathologist, but he also was an expert at mycology research, which ergot lysergic acid dimethylamide, which is LSD. And he was extremely accomplished. I mean, his obituary had several pages, listed all of his publications. The only publications that were not listed were all his books and all his articles on fungi research.
Interesting.
Weird. Yeah. Which
Very
is
weird.
very, very, very odd. So
yeah, especially with the intelligence origins
and he had
all those drugs.
The dad had a pedigree of, like, his major professor came out of the Lister Institute where all the vaccines were developed. Believe his son, the son of the guy who's professor, he was involved in the Nuremberg trials, as well as being the go-to in the Vietnam debacle, whatever. So yeah, I mean, it just all these people connected in that same area. So it just it's very interesting when you start looking at that time frame with music and LSD and trying to influence the masses and so forth. So
for sure. And Genesis Peorage himself doing a process church. He's was kind of the head of the Neo Process Church.
Correct.
Yeah. At least the public face of the Neo Process Church, and deeply involved in, espousing the philosophies of the process within that electronic dance music scene. Yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. So.
Fucking skinny puppy. And then it was like, oh my god! Like I even look at what the album "The Process" by them is supposed to be about, and they blatantly say the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Very proud.
Yeah, they're not hiding it. Yeah, they're very proud of it. Yeah, like, hey, yeah,
Nope.
this is what we believe in. This is the concept of this entire album is the process. No, I just think. Well, I'm glad we got back to the music portion because I remember now the Magical Mystery Tour you mentioned before, Nick.
Yes. Yes.
And the FBI vault records on the Process Church, it's claimed by one of their sources in the records. The sources are redacted, obviously, but it's claimed by one of the sources that back in 1972, the Process was operating a front operation in Los Angeles named the Magical Mystery Museum, which I've yet to be able to figure out if that was Beatles related, but to me that screams Beatles related with the Magical Mystery Tour and the Magical Mystery Museum.
Well, you also get the MMs and MMM there too. It's really interesting.
Okay, yeah. Well, what's the significance of those initials?
Well, again, like the triple M would be kind of like the whole thing with like the Gnostic Catholic thing with the O.T.O, and then the MM goes more back to, isn't that like with the Templars and the?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you turn it on its side, it's 333. MMM is very significant, which there is a link, and Dana, I think I sent you a link for that. There is a link with the Tate Bianca murders with MM, and it kind of ties into saying too much, but it ties into Mickey Mouse, Marilyn Manson, Frank Sinatra.
Interesting.
What's his name? I forget his name. The one that was married to Tate. Sorry. Polanski, sorry. And it ties all in together with the whole MM thing. And it's just a repetitive thing over and over. And they believe that it ties back into when the whole Templar thing is that the bastardization of the word Mahomet was given to the head that the Templars were worshiping, which is now considered Baphomet. But in France, they called it Mahomet because it was a bastardization of the word Muhammad, or not learned, or basic an idol or something like that. And so they referred to that head where they divinated all of their banking information, whatever, and they called it Mahomet. And so that's the original word supposedly for Baphomet. And so MM comes into play with the Templars and then is dispersed throughout history as MM, MMM, and so forth. So
interesting. Okay.
It's a long history, but yeah, the MM is extremely significant, and it plays into all of that. So
it's fascinating.
They were doing some like Prometheus type shit. Mm-hmm. When they had the head, I don't know if anybody saw that. It's a random movie. They stuck shit into it, and they're like, "Oh, look, if we give it electric impulses, we'll start twitching again."
Yeah,
that's what's in.
Yeah.
Was that the prequel to Alien?
Yeah. And then
I remember that one.
Yeah. Weird how it was just like a head, you know. Yeah.
It was supposedly John the Baptist's head.
That's what I thought. Yeah, it was supposedly John the Baptist.
And it's supposedly kept in the Hagia Sophia there in Istanbul.
So, interesting.
We'll see.
Yeah. Was there anything else that either one of you wanted to cover before we wrapped it up? Because I think that almost had an hour and a half. I think that's pretty good.
I think we've nailed a pretty wide-ranging discussion here on the process.
Yeah, for sure.
Some of the children of God.
Yes, and it came out really. I think it went really smooth, which is awesome. Because again, I think you guys both had different areas to talk about, but we made it happen. Thank you all again. Thank you for everybody who jumped in the chat. Really awesome chat and awesome comments. Please, people listening or coming back to check out the live chat for sure. Lisa, thank you for coming on. Would you like to let anybody know where they could get in touch with you?
Twitter at Solis Lisa and Instagram at Lisa Solis.
Awesome. And I think that'll probably be in the bottom. If not, I'll edit. And Dana, remind everybody again where they can find your stuff.
Rotting Jewels on YouTube and Instagram, Dana Duda on Twitter.
Yes, and her stuff is in the bottom. And JJ
Vance, host of Operation GCD. Thanks for the invite, Nick. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for the invite here. It's a great conversation. Enjoyed the conversation on the process again here today, Dana. It's
Me too.
Just learning new things every time I come join you all for a conversation. So I definitely enjoy it.
Awesome, great stuff. And I guess maybe just a teaser too for coming up in the future. Hopefully, within another few weeks, I will be finishing up that Dwight York thing with JJ Vance. So that's another
Oh,
thing.
nice.
To keep an eye out. Yeah, I did. I had my notes all finished and done. I'm ready to go. I just have to set a date. So yeah, we will finally finish that up, and that will have like a little bit more of the occult background behind that cult. You know, there
Nice.
is definitely connections to Freemasonry, and a whole bunch of weird stuff. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. Again, thank you all three for coming on. I had a great time. I can see that the listeners loved it as usual. Thank you
Awesome.
again. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.